pickup goods trains are important, but also a complicated operation. Small engines from branch lines pick up goods from individual stations, collecting freight such as milk, coal, stone, timber, and many other things. They bring it to a junction where a bigger engine is waiting. This engine will go to all the junctions to pick up and set down the goods until they have a very long train that heads to the docks. The FAC controller must choose his strongest and hard-working fleet of engines to take charge of the train, as after collecting all the trucks it can be difficult to haul. Donald and Douglas were often given the job of taking all the trucks to the docks. The FAC controller found that 2 engines were better than 1, and that the twins could work well together, and indeed this worked perfectly. Until one misty morning by Duck's branch line. Donald was waiting for his twin Douglas to bring in the last pickup goods from the branch line. The twins both worked on Duck's branch line and knew every part of it well, but everything looked so much more different in the mist. "Hey, Dougie, do you think we'll be alright in this fog?" asked Donald worriedly. "We'll be fine," soothed Douglas. "We know the line like the back of our buffers." Douglas shunted the last trucks to the back of the train. He coupled in front of Donald. The guard showed his green lamp and the 2 engines snorted out of the junction. Not too far up the line, there was a small gradient. The 2 engines never found it difficult together, but today the rails were greasy from the mist, and as soon as Douglas's wheels began to slip, then Donald found it difficult to stop his from spinning too. The twins struggled up the hill. The drivers were fighting for control. When one engine slipped, the driver shut the regulator off, but the second engine would start up again, causing them to slip. This made the ride very bumpy and very uncomfortable for the trucks. They started to get cross. "Stop bumping us!" they cried. But Donald and Douglas took no notice. "Oh, oh, oh, oh!" screamed the trucks. But still the engines took no notice. The ride to the top was so rough, a coupling was beginning to strain under the pressure. With one last great effort, the twins reached the top, but the train suddenly felt much lighter than before. As they steamed down the other side, they heard the guard's whistle. Both engine crews looked back. "Does he want us to stop?" quizzed Douglas's driver. "Where's our tail?" cried Donald's fireman. They soon got their answer. Rattling out of the mist was the other half of the train. The coupling had snapped when they reached the top and was now following them down the line. The guard applied his brakes in his van, but it was useless on the greasy rails. "Come on, Dougie, we can't hang around here," whistled Donald. As the 2 engines tried to escape, Douglas slipped violently. The driver did his best, but the force was so strong one of Douglas's cylinders burst. Steam shot everywhere. "Help, Donald, I've burst!" Douglas shouted. Donald tried to start the train but couldn't. He waited for the impact from the runaway. But the trucks only nudged the train slightly. The brake van had finally slowed them down and the guard had saved them from a nasty accident. Donald sighed with relief, but Douglas was in a lot of pain. The guard protected the train and Donald's fireman ran to the nearest signal box for help. Henry arrived to take over the train. "Good grief, Douglas, you look in bad shape," sympathised Henry. "Hope you get better." Henry steamed away, and when it was clear, Donald escorted his twin to the works. They found the FAC controller waiting for them. He examined Douglas with the workmen and assured him he was in good hands. Then he spoke to Donald. "I still need you to do your work while Douglas is being mended. You won't be doing it alone. I'll organise another engine to help you." He hurried away to his office to check engine availability. Donald was nervous. "I won't be able to do my work properly with another engine. Me and Dougie are twins, we have our own way of doing things," he said. His driver agreed. "It may be difficult, but we must make the best of a bad situation." For the rest of the day, Donald couldn't stop thinking of who his temporary twin would be. "I hope it's a cooperative engine like Edward or Duck. I'd work well with them," he said to himself. The next day he soon found out the only engine that was available was James. Donald wasn't happy and neither was James. "Why should I have to be your twin?" he puffed crossly. "All you Scottish engines do is haul dirty trucks." "We're useful engines who aren't bothered by our image," fumed Donald. "Clearly," snapped James, looking at Donald's mucky black paintwork. "Have you got a problem? Mind your attitude, Donald. Mine!" Donald let off steam loudly. "Stop that," shouted their drivers. "The FAC controller is relying on you two to work well together. We have hard work to do and you two arguing isn't going to make it any easier." James and Donald said nothing as they were both coupled together and headed towards the first junction to begin picking up their goods. At each station, they collected the trucks and the train soon became heavier. They were working hard, but not to Donald's standards. "Dinna pull so hard when approaching a station," snorted Donald. "Don't try and tell me what to do," exclaimed James. "I don't take orders from you." Finally, the train reached Duck's branch line. Duck had brought the goods. He shunted it at the back of the train and ran round. James had been uncoupled to take on water. Donald was red in the face. Duck bravely spoke to him. "You know," Duck said, "even though he is pompous and stuck up at times, he is a hard worker. If he wasn't, he wouldn't be on the Fat Controller's railway." "Aye, but his attitude can get too much at times," huffed Donald. "Indeed," agreed Duck, "but given the chance, James can pleasantly surprise you." Duck puffed away as James was coupled back in front of Donald. The guard blew his whistle, and the two engines set off again. Within no time they reached the small hill that caused the twins so much trouble before. The two engines charged it and were almost at the top when Donald's driver blew his whistle furiously. "What's wrong?" panted James. "I'm thirsty," gasped Donald. The driver stopped the train and rushed to Donald's cab. "Donald's injectors aren't working," cried the fireman. "We can't get the water into the boiler." Donald's injectors, when opened, let water from his tender tank go into his boiler to help create more steam. If they don't work, water doesn't go into the boiler and the fire causes havoc inside. In some cases, if not noticed, it can blow an engine up. Luckily for Donald, the crew noticed it early. The crew had no choice but to damp down the fire. James now had to pull Donald and the train to the docks. "Come on, James," encouraged his driver. "Let's show that Scottish engine what you can do." James used every ounce of steam and pulled with all his might. He snorted in front. The train was heavy, but slowly and steadily James pulled the train to the docks. As they arrived, sailors and passengers off ships all stopped to stare at James. Sparks flew into the air and soot and ash poured into the sky, but at last James brought the train in. Donald said nothing. He soon remembered what Duck had said. That afternoon, the Fat Controller came to see Donald and James at the works. He congratulated James and his crew on their fine efforts. "I am very proud of you, James," he said. Donald smiled. "I'm sorry I doubted you at first, but Duck was right. You have pleasantly surprised me." James felt triumphant, but relieved. "Now I can get back to pulling coaches and being a splendid red engine," he puffed. "Not quite yet, James," laughed the Fat Controller. "Donald may be out of service, but Douglas has just re-entered traffic and needs you as his twin." "No, you have to impress this Scottish twin," teased Douglas. James said nothing. He had a look of fright and tried to hide himself in a cloud of steam.